Welcome in everyone to Flyover Footy. My name is Matt Baker, joined this week by my friend in soccer, Stuart Holkren. We're live on YouTube. We're on your recording on YouTube. Thank you for tuning in to us on our live stream. Stu, we're back in studio in cartoon form after our epic live show last week. And prepping for this show felt like, I don't know, a return to norm almost, because it's our first Thursday show in the season. We're going to have like a KTRS part. We're going to have a to be named in a little bit part. I don't know. It feels like we're really back in the saddle here.
Oh yeah, it's nice. Last week was an event, and this feels more like that warm, snuggly settle in. You know, I have a mug of warm tea right here, and I'm just going to listen and talk some soccer.
Can't wait. If you're joining us on the live stream, jump in the chat, toss us questions. We'll get to it all at some point. I will go back through this chat and I will make sure we get to it, whether it's on the pod recording or not. But Mike, thank you. Live show was awesome. If you came out, Mike, Luke, anybody that came out, Tim, thank you guys so much for doing that. That was last Thursday was more than I think we ever could have hoped for as far as just the vibe. The vibes were high going into the season based on that. I was blown away and I really appreciate it. The one thing we didn't have last week were these Flyover Footy kits. They did not arrive in time for last week. I think I saw one person received them last week before the show. Mackay Joyner, unfortunately, was not playing the 10 last weekend. But we do have Flyover jerseys starting to hit in the wild. So if you have a Flyover kit, if you've bought one from Olive and York, thank you so much, first of all, in helping us to support Catherine Cares. As you know, all proceeds, literally all profits, and we don't receive a dime for these. Olive and York takes their piece. Catherine Cares takes the rest. If you haven't had a chance to do that, head over to oliveandyork.com and check them out. I personally love them. I'll say I think it might be a little bit more red than the city red, probably because you can't really duplicate that color, even though they do have our Pantones. So, you know, I think it turned out really well. If you didn't know, because I don't think I've ever really gone over all the different features and what I put on this kit, but in addition to the Flyover Footy crest on the front, the naming, the word mark Flyover Footy in the middle, the whole kit is covered in St. Louis. There are fleur-de-lis all over the place. It's the design of our background. If you're watching us on the live, well, you're obviously watching us on the live stream because this isn't going to be for the pod, but there's floors that kind of point at each other with sound waves because we're a podcast. And then on the sleeve is another floor that has headphones on it. So that's pretty cool. And on the back, which I don't know if I can really show, the number on the back is brick, which, you know, obviously St. Louis has a history with the brick facade and the brick line, all that kind of stuff. So I tried to draw from as many inspirations as possible, and I think it came out pretty well. It kind of makes a circle design around one of my favorite things, the confluence. The confluence is all over this kit. Not to say I'm stealing from City and the confluence kit kind of idea, but, you know, it's the confluence. You had to add, if we're going to call something the STL jersey, you had to add the confluence. And the floors all point to the confluence with the sound waves. I think it turned out pretty well. And I have Stu, Santi, and Phil's placed one big order. We all got them within a few days. Mine came last. So Stu, when I get you your jersey, I expect it to be on camera.
Oh, absolutely. We had a date to set up. Well, we never set the date, but we had the idea of a date. You know, when you have two 30-something friends who are saying, "Oh yeah, let's get together," and you never get together. No. But everyone knows that. So let's set a date next week and try to get my camera working. But no, it was, I love that explainer you're giving, Matt. You know, that's a little bit better than those like 2-page graphics that they put online by, you know, one of the PR firms. So doing it live, I think worked well.
Appreciate it. And with that, why don't we dive right into, I'm sure, what everybody's tuning in for, except on Instagram, because I forgot to click go live on that. I'm going to do that now. Anyway, what do you say we go live with the pod and let's dive into everything City related from this past week? I do believe I've captured just about everything, but I'm going to need you to keep me honest at some point throughout the show if I miss something. You ready?
All right, let's do it.
Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. My name is Matt Baker, joined this week by my friend in soccer, Stuart Holkren, and we're at match day 2 preview mode on Flyover Footy. We've had the epic kickoff episode last week looking at Charlotte. We've had the fallout, our first of the year, looking at the 1-1 draw against Charlotte. We are full on in-season mode here on Flyover Footy, and we're excited to dive into a ton of stuff. It's not just match day 2. It's player news, it's signings, it's extensions. Later on, we'll have MLS talk. We'll have roster recaps, overviews, transfer tracker breakdowns. But before we get into all that, welcoming in Stu. How you doing this week, buddy?
Oh, I'm doing good. Still riding high off of last week's live show and home opener. The weather's finally getting amazing in St. Louis. So hopefully, this is after this recording. If you're listening to this, maybe you'll be outside in the warm sun, enjoying some beautiful St. Louis weather.
Honestly, there's no better thing to do in St. Louis than grab your phone, download Flyover Footy, pop in some earbuds, and head over to Forest Park. I mean, I cannot think of a more perfect afternoon in a soon-to-be springtime St. Louis. But, shameless plug aside, Stu, we've got a lot to dig into before match day 2 preview. We'll get to San Diego in just a minute. The MLS After Dark version of Sunday Night Soccer this week. But before that, we got to recap what's been going on with this roster because we've got some pretty seismic moves. The first one is an interesting one because it's not just the move. It's all of the things surrounding the move. The signing this week is Sergio Cordova, the 28-year-old Venezuelan forward coming to St. Louis on loan from Young Boys in Switzerland's first-tier Super League. Cordova is classified as a designated player for the duration of his loan through June 30th, 2026. He does have an option to buy, and he will occupy an international slot. What I'm told here is the salary doesn't rise to the level of a DP player. This is more of a bookkeeping mechanism to lower the overall roster costs related to the salary and the loan fees only during this short duration. As I said, the agreement does include a purchase option. And the conversations on this one all over social media have the conversations around the type of loan and the GAM that plays into it and the DP factor that plays into it. I think Stu has far overshadowed the actual conversation of Cordova as a player. Like, what does he bring to St. Louis? What quality does he actually bring? Because in the near term for St. Louis, what it means on roster building is we're basically done with all those big slots. We'll talk about the roster here in a little bit on Flyover, and we have a couple roster slots open still, 2 to be exact, but we're done with our DP and U22 build at the moment for this window. Cordova, Hartle, and Berkey are our designated players. Our U22 slots are being occupied by Falou Fall, Songbin Zhang, and Jake Girdwood-Reich, who, yes, he still does occupy a U22 slot as of the last thing I heard. Unless Corey Wray was able to pull a rabbit out of his hat and figure out some magic, JGR still occupies a U22 slot, even though he doesn't occupy an actual roster slot for St. Louis, terms of the loan and all that jazz. But we do have some open roster slots. The critical spots are taken. In statistics, looking at what kind of player Cordova is, 6'2", in just under 300 games, 292 pro games. He has 40 goals and 18 assists, including 15 goals and 2 assists with MLS because he played for RSL on loan in 2022, and he was signed to the Vancouver Whitecaps in 2023 as a designated player for them. The reports on Transfermarkt have it at around a $2.3 million purchase of Cordova at the time for Vancouver, but then Vancouver went and sold him later in the season, September-October timeframe. They sold him for around $2.5 million, made a profit on him after he didn't really perform that much for him in 2023. He profiles, by all accounts, as a physical forward, capable of pinning center backs deep, winning aerial duels, able to be a target striker. Corey Wray in this signing says, quote, adding Sergio on loan gives us valuable depth and short-term reinforcement while maintaining the flexibility that is important in our long-term plans. He goes on to say, we are always looking to maximize the MLS roster mechanisms, and putting Sergio in the DP slot will benefit us in several ways while also giving us options moving forward. Beyond that, he brings qualities we value in a striker with his movement, ability to link play, and stretch defenses. We are excited to get him integrated with the group and look forward to what he can add over the coming months. Stu, there's a lot to take in. What are your thoughts?
Well, the first thought is his aerial presence. That combined with Rafael Santos' set piece service that we're expecting from that left wing back position, and also Mamadou Mbake, who's supposed to also be very lethal with headers, is just a combination I'm interested to see how we're going to take advantage of. Cordova's a guy who his numbers do not pop out as super enticing if you look at 58, goal contributions over nearly 300 professional games.
Mm-hmm.
However, that's maybe we'll see more than what meets the eye there. Certainly, Whitecaps fans and RSL fans haven't been the biggest backers, shall we say. They haven't been singing from the rooftops about what he brings, but a lot of them say that he has the potential, he has the talent, he has the physical tools. So we'll see if DeMay can unlock that.
That's one of the things that I think is key to me is can his capabilities, his talent be unlocked? I agree with you universally. Talking to RSL fans, Vancouver fans, everybody was underwhelmed. And I think the underwhelming factor from Vancouver came by the fact that he was signed as a designated player. So there were expectations that he vastly underperformed. If anybody out there thinks Klaus underperformed as a DP, go back and look at Cordova's stats in Vancouver in 2023, and you'll understand what an underperforming DP looks like. The factors of his contractual issues, the roster mechanism around this is what makes this the most interesting to me. Corey Wray has long said that he wants to leverage all MLS roster mechanisms. He wants to take advantage of everything available. And boy, is it hard to really overlook taking advantage of everything available in this move. What this move also cemented is that we are in the 3 designated player model of roster construction for the first half of the season. The way MLS works in constructing a roster nowadays is there are 2 ways you can leverage those key spots. You can either have 3 DPs and 3 U22s, or you can have 2 DPs and 4 U22s, plus get an additional allotment of GAM that has to be spent during that season. What this move means is that for the first half of the season, we are locked into that 3 DP model of Cordova, Berkey, and Hartle. That means we don't lose, but we forego $1 million in GAM for the first half of the season that we would otherwise have been able to spend on the roster. Like I said, it has to be spent in the same season. So we would have been able to spend that later on this year, but we don't have that opportunity now. The reason that Cordova is a DP at this point, because I've heard, like I said, his salary does not rise to the level of a DP, bookkeeping mechanism. The purchase option is the key here. What Corey Wray seems to have done is he signed he received a loanee that is a potential DP in price, if not in performance. The performance that's entirely up in the air. So there's a lot of debate, very valid, about whether Cordova will perform based on what he's done in the past. Can our system unlock his full potential the way that RSL and Vancouver didn't a few years ago? And honestly, the way that Young Boys didn't either, because he hasn't been very overwhelming in Switzerland either. So Wray bringing Cordova in on a DP deal now, to me, is saying he's front loading the contract. Which you can do in MLS. You don't have to amortize the transfer fee or anything across the life of the contract. He's front loading things to the point where if they decide to keep Cordova, then he will not be a designated player when he signs his full contract, when we pick up that purchase option. So DP for the loan, that was very specific here in what the team's press release said. That means we still will have a DP open this summer. So if we pick up Cordova's option, he becomes a TAM or lower player for the duration of his contract. We still have a DP or a U22 slot open. At that point, we can choose which roster construction model. So Wray still has one of those spots open. That's what he means by the flexibility. Cordova won't be a DP after the loan in June, whether he's with City or not. The question is going to be, is the opportunity cost of picking up Cordova in this manner to have flexibility if we sign him later and free up that DP slot later, is that worth not having filled the DP slot, opted for the U22 roster construction model, and taken the $1 million in GAM that we could at some point this season apply to players, spend on a transfer fee this summer, That's the big question. I like that Ray's taken advantage of all these mechanisms and doing what he can to go in the weeds on here. But honestly, the linchpin of this entire operation is the quality of Sergio Cordova. If we pick up his option, to me, at this summer, Stu, that means he not only would have done something to show that we should pick up his option, but it proves this operation a success. If Cordova is able to provide enough value to us, whether it's goal scoring, goal contributions, or whatever, in the 11 or 12 games that we'll have him for, then picking up his option frees up a DP slot, and it provides that extra value in this overall move versus not filling the slot at all, going empty with a DP, probably empty with a U22, and then just hoarding more GAM, because we already have one of the biggest buckets of GAM in the entire league. Last thing I'll say, Stu, before your thoughts on just this whole roster mechanism is, if you're complaining about the foregoing of the GAM in this whole move, but you're also one of the people who say we need to replace Klaus, we have to find, we need to find some kind of an option. Those two positions seem to me to be diametrically opposed. What will happen this summer is our ability to evaluate the quality of Cordova and whether Wray made the right choice in making this entire move for Cordova. That's the thing to me. Right now, we can say that Cordova appears to be rated strongly by Wray. He has borderline success, 15 goals, 2 assists in 2 seasons with RSL in Vancouver. Not DP level success, but that would put him in the top 3 or 4 goal scorers for St. Louis. And if he can be unlocked, like you said, Stu, if he can be re-signed or signed to his full, pick up the option, then I think this experiment, this operation would prove to be a success, as opposed to, again, hoarding GAM, but not actually having anybody as reinforcements for Klaus replacement or etc. What do you think about how this whole thing is playing out on the roster construction side?
So yeah, one of our big requests that we wanted for the next soccer director was that we had someone who knew how to leverage MLS roster rules, and we'll get to sort of our allocation disorder issue in a little bit. But Corey Wray, definitely did some outside of the box thinking that I think can say pretty confidently Lutz wouldn't have done with his approach. Now, the GAM is certainly a loss, and it's just such a funny league that you have to think in these terms. But I mean, I would even say in some way that if Cordova doesn't work out and we end the loan and part ways with him, it's still not a disaster of a signing, of a loan. If you cut bait at that point, move on, you don't have a player that you're shackled to as a DP for the rest of the season, for next season, whatever. So the upside is definitely there if he can actually come good. If he doesn't, then again, you cut bait, and he probably won't be the only outgoing this summer. So the roster is going to shape up and look different at the end of the summer window. So, and getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, the second half of the season, like we talked last week, is going to be easier than the first half schedule wise. So any points we pick up on the first half that we can put towards the second half of the season is really kind of where we're saving up our jet fuel for.
Easier and more voluminous. 14 games in the first half of the season before the World Cup break, 20 games after. So there's a lot of the big difference in the first half of the season versus second, as well as quality wise. The thing you said is the other factor of this, where the chances being taken now, it's an opportunity cost of 1 million GAM hoarding and not filling the spot versus having a player replacing Klaus. You don't get the performance. You could consider it being out $1 million in GAM, and you cut bait on Cordova, and you still are right back where you were now. You took a shot, you took a swing, it didn't work. The very least, I credit Corey Wray and the front office for taking that swing. They made their evaluation, they made their talent assessment, and they picked Cordova. I know there were other players that they've been searching for. I'm not saying Cordova is an option B or C, but I'm saying that there was more on the big board than just Sergio Cordova, but he was one of the players on the big board. And so now the question is, in the 11 or 12 games, because he's not going to play this weekend, in the 11 or 12 games left in the first half of the season, how much of an impact he will make. And yes, we'll talk later on about where he might fit in the roster and who he might play alongside. But I think this is a good segue into the fact that this isn't the only bit of roster news that has broken this week. We also have 2 extensions. So the last couple of bits of City news directly are that Chris Durkin and Simon Betcher have both inked extensions through June 2028. Both players have options for the 28-29 season now. And this seems to be more of Corey Wray cementing his core of players. Stu, what do you think about Durkin and Betcher being re-signed at this point in the season after Matchday 1, knowing that I believe both of their contracts were up after this year? I've already refreshed my page over here that I'll show in a little bit, but picking up their or extending them at this point, and specifically Durkin and Betcher, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Betcher had an option for next year. I guess one last thing sorry to cut back on Cordova. A difference between signing him versus signing a guy like Christian Ramirez. And we talked before we went live about this, a little bit of Ramirez would be, I mean, you'd have to take him on for the full season. I think you might get a equivalent amount of goal contributions from Ramirez and Cordova. I think Cordova probably fits DeMay's system better and what Corey Ray's looking for. But I mean, if you're going stopgap, stopping the bleeding, Christian Ramirez does make some sense, I would say, but I don't know. I mean, then I wouldn't say stuck with him, but then we are committed to him for at least 1 year. And I think that's inflexibility that Corey Ray didn't want.
There's a salary consideration too. Christian Ramirez last year was making $570,000, and so in addition to what that would tie you to, if you get a raise to that, because they're a player association kind of waiver related, escalators. So there are salary considerations, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, and for that amount of money, you could get 2/3 of a Tommaso and Struck. So
stop. But there was also a timing thing on Christian Ramirez, because this is a comparison a lot of people make. Why didn't we go Christian Ramirez? By all accounts, the report for Sergio Cordova was that the deal was being finalized. This would have been a situation, I think, where Wray would have said, like, the I's are being dotted, the T's are being crossed, and then Wray would have had to yank the contract away, rip it up, and then go negotiate with Ramirez, because he was waived after the roster, or right before roster lock deadline on Friday this past week. This was a surprise. People weren't expecting him, and I don't think the timing lined up also, in addition to the fit, the price, all that stuff.
Yeah, and if we're honest with ourselves, Austin's a little bit more of a appealing destination at the moment. If you're Christian Ramirez, and I did not see that about his salary, Hootski.
Hootski in the chat saying Austin's only paying $225,000 of his salary.
Yeah,
possibly a deal about the being waived by the LA Galaxy and what happens if you pick up a player when that happens.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. But neither of those, signing Ramirez wouldn't exactly have thrilled me either. I guess I'll just put it that way. But going back to Durkin and Betcher extending, I mean, I personally didn't see Durkin as part of the core going forward necessarily. Not that I thought he would be gone, but he didn't seem like the one who would be extended at this point. But Durkin and Betcher extending, they're good, probably depth guys, as long as we're adding talent on top of them. And Durkin can run. I mean, he was ill last week, and then he just ran his butt off in the home opener.
Almost played 90 out and tied in the beep test with Daniel Edelman. Stu, the interesting thing for me on what Corey Ray had to say on these two, Corey Ray, I feel like he needs to be careful on some of these quotes in these press releases that they put out. Simon Betcher's seemed fine. Quote, "We are pleased to extend Simon's contract, keep him in St. Louis. Simon's movement, work rate, and willingness to fight for the team make him a constant threat in the final third and an asset to our attacking group. He has embraced the group and the culture we are building, and we look forward to continuing to support his growth and seeing his impact on the team moving forward." But on his comments with Chris Durkin, quote, "We are extremely happy to keep a first-team player like Chris at the club for years to come. He's a reliable presence in midfield and brings a strong work ethic, professionalism, and leadership that are invaluable to our group. While we always want to bring in talented players, it means a lot to us to have players who are here and want to continue with our club. Man, I mean, like, I don't want to read too much into these because we don't see the facial expressions. We don't see, but that's a rough quote at the end. While we always want to bring in talented players, it means a lot to us to have players who are here and want to continue with our club. Come on. Can we say something a little better about Chris Durkin on this?
Yeah, I mean, as long as we would like to bring in more skilled players, having a guy who's already here, who we know contributes, fits the style, yada yada yada. I'm sure it wasn't meant that way, but
No.
a few people caught that, and it was pretty funny.
Kind of why I had to bring it up, but Hootski's right in the chat. Text to voice could have been more like, while we always want to bring in talented players, it's great when we can, when players who are here want to continue with our club. So benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, that's an interesting statement. What else is interesting this week, Stu? Pivoting away from City players before we get into our preview, because we are right around the corner from our preview to San Diego, I promise. We got to address the big news from the beginning of this week and at least talk through it a little bit. The Josh Sargent to Toronto deal appears to be rounding third base, to borrow a baseball euphemism. Tom Bogert has reported that St. Louis City is set to receive $500,000 in GAM plus an additional $200,000 in add-ons for Josh Sargent going to Toronto because of St. Louis holding Sargent's rights via the dissolution of the allocation order. And Bogert finally addresses this after this being the elephant in the city room during this entire negotiation. He clarifies it's a one-of-one situation. It is not just discovery rights. It is allocation order related. It is Lutz Pfannenstiel as one final parting gift for St. Louis. And we hope we can do something with this 700,000 or 500,000+ in GAM. But this was kind of that last big question of what will St. Louis get? And it could be that this deal was held up in part because St. Louis was trying to extract so much GAM out of this unique situation for Josh Sargent. Obviously, this was never really a question at this point lately of will Sargent go to St. Louis, but what are your thoughts on this as our GAM haul?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, you can never, if a player has their heart set on playing somewhere, they're going to play there. And another thing, MLS was never going to stand in the way of a guy like Josh Sargent coming to Toronto. And if St. Louis was, even though we owned his rights, there's no way we could say ultimately, hey, we're blocking it from happening. At that point, MLS would step in and arbitrate and come up with something, which they very well might have done. So we have no idea. At this point, 500,000 in GAM, that's 100,000 more than Mueller had last year. And I think Almiron for their rights. I know allocation's a little bit different than discovery rights, but sort of similar. And we don't know what those add-ons are for the GAM. They could be realistic, unrealistic. They could just be there to kind of fluff up the numbers. So I'm not personally counting and taking into account the 200,000 at all. I'm focused on the 500,000. It'll be disappointing to see Josh in MLS, not with St. Louis. But he's in the East. He's playing for a team that I personally don't have a lot of negative feelings towards. So, yeah, I mean, again, going back to Corey Wray being hired, leveraging roster rules and all the MLS quirks, this is about as good as you could get. I think a lot of us were bracing for just the minimum 50,000 in GAM on this.
Which is a smart thing to do. I mean, set the expectations low, but this is a one-of-one situation. It doesn't, I don't think it's going to have an impact into the new bar set for discovery rights necessarily. The last thing I'll say on this one is reiterating how just not in the running St. Louis was for this, by all accounts. And that's a factor of the willingness by Toronto to pay this insane transfer fee up to 27 million by the latest reports, 22 to 27 million, which puts Sargent, could put him as the most expensive incoming transfer fee, but definitely top 3. And that's a situation that only Toronto FC were willing to pay. And it was partially due to Sargent only wanting to go to Toronto. Both sides of these were reported pretty consistently of Toronto being the only team willing to spend that much, and St. Louis or Josh Sargent and family only wanting to go to Toronto. This seems to be, it was Toronto or bust, and Toronto was able to get it across the line with all these I's dotted, T's crossed on the MLS side. And yes, it stinks for St. Louis. Like I said on social media, it stinks to not be in the running for this. But to assume that St. Louis didn't try to force the issue with the allocation order rights being ours, I think that discounts work the city was doing behind the scenes. And given the time, like I said, for this to happen from first report to now, just now getting the GAM money reported for St. Louis, pretty clear St. Louis was having backroom negotiations about this, whether it was to sign Sargent, which I don't think they were really willing to spend $25+ million on him, but at the very least, extracting as much possible value they can because of this unique situation. So kudos to them for at least getting this amount of GAM, even if Sargent was never really going to go to St. Louis. And I also, conversations with various folks and friends, I do think it's a little presumptuous for fans to assume that because Sargent grew up here, played for Gallagher and say SCLFC, the academy, for a brief period of time, that because he went through that pipeline and got that far, that he would automatically choose to or be coming back to St. Louis. I obviously want every homegrown that comes through St. Louis to come back and play for City at this point, whether they came through the City Academy, STLFC Academy, independent club like Boffs, or anywhere else. But that's not the reality of the situation. Players get to choose these kinds of situations at what in the stage Sargent was at, just as much as teams can choose to pay transfer fees. And unfortunately, this is a situation we're in. And we're probably going to have to welcome Josh Sargent in Toronto to Energizer Park in the second half of the season, Stu.
Yeah, I just hope he's healthy.
Another good point about why some people aren't too heartbroken about not getting him. You are listening to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. My name is Matt Baker, joined by Stuart Holmgren, and we are ready to dive into San Diego. Our first match against San Diego FC, mirroring Matchday 2 of last year. St. Louis travels to San Diego. The history of these two clubs is long and storied in the sense that they played twice in 2025, and they had a draw, and St. Louis lost 2-1. The matches, it's been almost a full year. March 1st last season, we drew in the second match of our season. We opened Snapdragon Stadium for San Diego FC. If you were there, you remember very vividly some teleprompter things that they had to put up because there were some unsavory chants going on. But it was also one of the most boring games I can recall. And I've watched a lot of Olaf Melberg matches last season. But then we had a 2-1 loss on May 2nd in St. Louis that, both of those matches, you can draw, I would say, absolutely nothing in comparison to what we're about to see, other than the fact that we kind of experienced San Diego. The St. Louis side is not going to look the same. The draw at the beginning of last season, we saw, I counted 4 of our current team starters. We had Betcher, Vollum, Hartl, and Berkey starting in that game. And then the loss that we had on May 10th, we had 3 starters, Hartl, Vollum, and Baumgartl. Berkey was injured for that one with his fractured finger, and Ben Lunt was starting. This season, at least from the St. Louis City side, totally different ballgame. Where we sit right now, because now we get to start going into standings, form, trends, all that stuff. They're not very long and storied from Matchday 1, but we are currently sitting tied for 9th in the West with 1 draw and 1 point after last week's home draw, a 1-1 draw against Charlotte. The things that we saw in that match, to boil last week's fallout into about 3 bullet points: we won possession, we allowed few shots, we allowed fewer shots on target, we progressed a lot through our wings, we used our wings as our buildup, and we leveraged our midfielders to help create those overloads. Durkin on the left, Edelman on the right by and large, and they helped to progress by creating those numerical advantages in those tight spaces. The wide center backs with the wing backs, with the midfielder on that side, with the attacking mid, that was kind of how we created connections more often than not. Progressing the ball through the wings, but also having more final third entrances, yet not a ton of possession inside the final third. We had passes within the final third that were pretty low, so we didn't live and breathe, where I would hope that St. Louis eventually becomes that team that can move the ball into the final third and create space, draw teams out and around, and complete a succession of passes within the final third. We didn't see that a lot last week. We're also not operating at full capacity for St. Louis to me. even going into this week, we're not likely to see a whole lot of changes. This week, City has their press conference on Friday. So as of this recording, we don't have official wording, and the official player availability report will not be out for St. Louis until Saturday. So educated guesses run galore here. Baloo Fall will not be playing. He was running solo earlier in the week, so he had not yet progressed to full team training. Tells me he's not going to be available. Thomas Olstrock still absent from outdoor training with his leg injury, not available. Tyson Pierce still absent from outdoor training with a groin injury, not available. I think Caden Glover was seen in a walking boot last week. There haven't been any official reports, but in general, I just think of Caden Glover as not available. Edu Leuven was absent from training earlier this week, missed last week's game due to personal reasons. The team showed their unwavering support for him pre-game. I don't know if he'll be available, but if he's not training, then it's not looking good for that. Mbake Fall. Here's where it starts to get good, because that was a lot of rough news. Mbake Fall is here. He is training, and he is going to be available unless something catastrophic happens, which we're not willing that into existence on Flyover Footy. Yohan Demay said he will be available as long as there's no setbacks on medicals, and his minutes would depend on things like training this week and his fitness overall. So we know Mbake hasn't actually played since January 11th in match competition with Barca B, but his arrival at the end of last week, his training on Tuesday, he would seem to be a good candidate for a bench slot, which I'm excited to see him take that first step. And then going into the next few weeks against the LAFCs and Seattles of the world, we can have a bigger conversation about his starting caliber. And then Sergio Cordova signed, has not begun training with the team as of Tuesday earlier in this week. We did see the official photographs. Don't think I've seen an official number. Stu, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I don't think I saw a Cordova number announced yet.
No, I haven't seen one yet.
Okay. Biggest storylines for St. Louis City. And this is where I want to get your picture on where you see St. Louis coming into this, Stu. Can they improve on finishing? This was another problem that we had 22 or so shots. We had one goal. The St. Louis City side needs to get better in that regard. We saw a lot of positives. We saw a lot of things to build off of, but finishing is something that we, as City fans, especially with PTSD from last season, we need to improve on our finishing. We need to overperform our XG at least a game or two, or get near it, because last week we had like 1.59 XG. We need to start overperforming that here and there. Can we continue to retain possession? And I'm talking meaningful possession against a different caliber, different type of team. This San Diego team that we're going to talk about, I'm going to break them all down here in just a minute. They are a massively different team in how they look than Charlotte was. And then finally, what are we going to get out of Betcher and Durkin after their extensions? Are they going to come in with a fiery after these contract extensions? Are they going to have something to prove now that they're being paid more, they're extended longer, they're showing that trust as a core of St. Louis City? Stu, what do you think about St. Louis going into this match?
Well, I mean, I think some level of momentum has to be at our back. Not saying that, obviously we want to win the home opener, but I think a lot of us were expecting to lose that. The signings of Betcher and Durkin are extensions. Mbake coming into traveling and arriving. Cordova signing. I hope that there's a level of excitement around the club right now. Oh man, finishing, that's tough. You ask us last year after the Colorado Rapids home opener, can we improve on our finishing? And we would have the same exact conversation. I don't know. I certainly hope so. I certainly hope that Betcher bags a couple. McSorley can finish when he's one-on-one with the keeper, or Seti gets a couple more opportunities. I don't know.
It's a tough matchup. That's the thing. And let's look at San Diego, because we're short on time on the Big 550 KTRS. San Diego comes into this match tied for first in the West. If you're facing a team at this point in the season, Stu, I'm just going to stop before I say everything else. You're facing a team at this point in the season, and they are a CONCACAF Champions Cup team. You would expect that they would have fixture congestion issues. Like we remember 2024 when we were there, and we had that with a less than ideal roster, but fixture congestion in Champions Cup is a thing. San Diego is bucking that trend, unfortunately. So the whole idea of us catching San Diego match day 2 while they're in Champions Cup and thinking this is perfect. Well, we're going to catch them when they're rotating their squads. My goodness, were the scheduling gods not on our side for this. San Diego's 1-0. They're in first place on goal differential because they beat Montreal 5-0 last week at home. Before Montreal, they did play 2 Champions Cup games, February 3rd and February 10th. So somehow they have this perfect amount of rest, weekly rest for Champions Cup going into the MLS season. Eventually, here in a few weeks, they will have fixture congestion after they play us. But for our game, February 3rd, they beat Pumas at home 4-1. And then February 10th, they lost away to Pumas just 1-0. They've moved on in Champions Cup. They faced Toluca, but not until March 11th. So they'll have us. I think they have SKC after us, and then they have a midweek match with Champions Cup. So this team has 9 goals scored and 2 goals against in their 3 games that they've started the season. All their goals have been at home and only 1 goal against at home. This is a ridiculous start by this San Diego team that has kept up the fire from last season to an absolutely incredible extent. They've been consistent in their first 3 games in their lineups as well. They've only swapped out, I think 2, maybe 3, if you count the goalkeeper, total players throughout these matches. 9 starters have remained the same in all 3 matches, 8 or 9 if you count the goalie. Only differences really in the field being central midfield and right back. Soma and Eisner started in the Champions Cup, and Valakari and Sargent in MLS last week. They really don't have many significant injuries that they're dealing with, but by and large, we do know the type of San Diego team that we're getting. American Soccer Analysis has them as the 2nd most patient team in building from the back after match day 1. The question to me at first, when I looked at that Montreal match, was, is it indicative of San Diego just being fired up, or is it a terrible Montreal team, or is it both? And then looking back at their Pumas matches, Pumas is 3rd in Liga MX through 7 games right now in their Clausura. They put up 4 goals against that team at home before 5 against Montreal. And they had all these different goal scorers against Montreal as well. We'll go into the tactics in just a second, but this team seems to be absolutely ridiculously loaded, and they're not that star-studded, dude.
Yeah, I mean, the guy who's the beating heart of their midfield, Jeppy Shurskov, he's kind of a journeyman Danish midfielder who played his entire career in Denmark, I believe, until he came to MLS, and he is just fantastic. So he's one to keep an eye on. He's their number 6 out there. So it'll be interesting seeing him match up. But he's a guy who started to get more and more plaudits really as last season went on. But going into this year, they are just an interesting team. They have their starting keeper is 19-year-old Duran Furry, I believe, and he's a local San Diego native. I mean, they're not even starting guys who were expected last year to be some of their key contributors, like Alex Mighton, who's their attacking midfielder, out wide player. So, oh man, there's obviously a chance, but what a, like you said, cake schedule for them to start off the season with, to get Montreal at home, St. Louis at home, and then, the just coughing baby of MLS right now, Sporting KC.
The cakewalk.
Yeah, that's the dream and the exact opposite of what we have.
Well, let's talk about San Diego a little bit more in depth real quick before we get our starting 11s and our score predictions too. Last year, San Diego set the expansion record for both points and points per game. They were the most dominant first-year squad in MLS regular season history. They made a deep postseason run. They fell to the Vancouver Whitecaps in the Western Conference Finals, but they have had some player drama, as we'll get to with Chucky Lozano. On the field, clear tactical vision. Mikey Vargas has this club operating at an extremely high level with the players that they have. No team in Major League Soccer built from the back as consistently as San Diego did last year. They led the league in passes in their own third. They had intricate build-up patterns. They had 3-man runs that were just really beautiful to watch. And they leveraged, like you said, Jeppy Surkov at the 6, Chris McVeigh, Manu Dua at center back. and just a bunch of other players to help progress the ball up to and including their star winger, Anders Dreyer. And when you talk about why San Diego is so successful in their goal scoring output, a lot of it would go back to Anders Dreyer, not just in goal scoring output, but in just what he does in the attacking third. The number of players, the top 2 players who posted the most non-penalty goal contributions last season in 2025. Stu, can you name? You could probably name both of them if you know this conversation and you go with the most obvious choice in Major League Soccer of the top 2 in non-penalty goal contributions.
Well, I'm gonna say Anders Dreyer and non-penalty. I feel like that's
just go with the obvious.
Buanga,
Lionel Messi.
Oh, Messi, yeah.
Like the most obvious. Like you could just not even watch Major League Soccer and say which player. It's Messi. It's Messi and Dreyer. That's insane. Dreyer was signed as a DP from Anderlecht before last year. He's on the right side of San Diego's attack. He had 33 non-penalty goal contributions. Messi obviously ran away with the MVP and all the accolades, but Anders Dreyer was my favorite player in Major League Soccer to watch last year. He's comfortable between the lines in the central areas. He can bob and weave everywhere, drop deep to conduct build up with the midfield, help in that short ball progression, but he always has his eye on goal. He's always looking to create with his own shot, and he is a menace in the final third. I remember last season, I think it was our left center back. It wasn't Henry Kessler. One of our other center backs was man marking Anders Dreyer a lot. And I wonder if we're going to have that kind of thing going on because Dreyer is an absolute menace. Manu Dua is another player like you were describing. I think that just these kind of players who were supposed to be nothing last season. And now Manu Dua is one of the most coveted center backs in all Major League Soccer. He was the first overall draft pick by San Diego in last year's Super Draft. He was initially a defensive midfielder, but then they swapped him positions, 20 years old, center back, elite defensive range. He's got a quick first step, and he helps out San Diego's possession-focused back line. He's the kind of player that you build around, you can eventually sell in a couple years. He's going to go play in Europe at some point, but his capabilities on the ball, his vision, his speed, his first instinct move, it's insane. Manu Dua is one of my players to watch, and he's going to cause havoc for St. Louis's attack. So they've got top to bottom. They have a pretty loaded lineup. The starting lineup that I would expect for San Diego would either look at Kieran Sargent or Eisner at left back, Manu Dua, Christopher McVeigh, and Luca Bombino, or Bombino at left back, either Sargent or Eisner at right back. Ani Valakari, Jeppe Surkov, and Anibal Godoy are their midfielders. Amali Pellegrino, Marcus Ingvartsen, and Anders Dreyer are their attacking trio, with Ingvartsen as their striker. It's just a menace from top to bottom. And they've lost very few players since last season. Luca De La Torre, Patty McNair, and Chucky Lozano are their notable losses. I don't say departures necessarily because De La Torre and McNair were departures. Chucky Lozano is probably the biggest off the field story that's occurred. If you haven't heard this, Chucky Lozano, Mexican national team legend or star, depending on your perspective, he was signed to San Diego last season, but was suspended after some kind of outburst happened in October of last year. He didn't play, didn't come off the bench. Mikey Varas was just not having it. And so Varas benched him. He didn't start their most important games of the season at the end of the season. And Tyler Heaps, their chief soccer officer, said, quote, Chucky, quote, will not be a part of the Sporting plans moving forward. So they've got a DP on the roster, a very capable player in Lozano, but they're not going to utilize him. He's not going to play against St. Louis by all accounts. Hasn't played, doesn't seem like he's going to. And even though he occupies the DP slot, they can still do all of this without him. Stu, looking matchup wise, because we need to get into our score predictions here in just a second. Matchup wise, what are you most interested to see in the positional battles? Is it something like a Dreyer and an Ingvartsen against our back line with Polvera there at center back? Or is it more how our attack can get through Dua and McVeigh? Wing battles, midfield? Where's your positional area to watch for this one?
Well, I think it'll be really interesting seeing, well, first of all, I thought, and I'm sure you talked about this, I didn't have a chance to listen, admittedly, to the fallout. Talked about Orozco and Vollum on the right side last week. So taking on Zaha, and then this week they're going to take on Pellegrino and Valkyrie. I think that'll be a really interesting combination back-to-back. See if they can respond with a similar shutdown this week. As far as defensively, Shirkov in that center midfield, the midfield battle between him and, Hartle, or him and Durkin, should be really interesting to watch. Or, Luca Bambino is such a fascinating guy and a diamond in the rough that San Diego found, and they're great scouting that they're just finding these people and leveraging all sorts of value to get him out of LAFC last year on loan and sign permanently. But yeah, not to go too far into it, the center midfield is what I'm going to be most interested in.
Fair enough. I am looking for us to not allow goals. I'm more worried about us not allowing goals than I am us scoring goals in this one. So I'm going to be watching to see Dante Polvera, how he manages somebody like an Anders Dreyer on our left side, their right side. That to me might be the battle to watch, is Dreyer and Polvera, knowing the spacing that Polvera is still learning at center back. That's my battle to watch. Stu, starting 11 predictions for St. Louis, score predictions. We'll give an update on our Catherine Cares prop bets, and then we got to get out of here for KTRS. My starting 11 prediction for St. Louis is the exact same one as last week.
Yeah.
Roman Berkey, Dante Polvera, Timo Baumgartel, Haziel Orozco, Rafael Santos, Chris Durkin, Daniel Edelman, Conrad Vollum, Marcel Hartle, Song Bin Zhang, and Simon Betcher. It's either a 3-4-2-1 or a 3-4-1-2, depending on how you want to look at it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any need to change the lineup from what we saw last week. I would like to see Joyner play this week. Otherwise, let's run it back.
All right, score predictions. I've got it 1-1.
I'm gonna go 2-1 San Diego. I'll be the pessimist, but I'll be happily surprised with the draw on this one.
All right, prop bet updates, our events. I realized, Stu, that we set a ton for Catherine Cares season long. So really the only thing we ended up last week with was a goal, which is $10 to Catherine Cares. So I'm adding two more things. I'm adding $10 for a win and $5 for a draw. A little bit more that we can track week over week, as opposed to just looking forward to tacking up scores to the end. So we have $15 in the bank for Catherine Cares as of week 1. Stu, can you stick around for the other side of this for a few minutes? Because we have a little bit more that I want to get into about San Diego.
Yeah, we'll stick around for a few more minutes, and then I'm going to drop off to Dreamland.
All right. That's it for Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. Thank you for joining us so much. Enjoy Matchday 2 against San Diego. And for more Flyover Footy, check us out on our podcast, where we will have a special Flyover After Dark. I'm Matt Baker. This is Stuart Holgren. Thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you later. And if you're new joining us on Flyover Footy this year, this is the part where we grab a drink and we hang out for a little bit with a little bit of a chat. We missed a ton against San Diego, so I do want to circle back to San Diego in just a minute, but we'll be right back. Stu, I realized that unlike Phil, I can actually see if you're back. So you tell me if you ever left.
No, I never left. I am looking up some of the responses for the fence being torn up. So
Poor Stu. Poor Stu had his fence tore up in the city of St. Louis.
Yeah, but they're taking care of it. Hopefully, we'll see.
All right, dude. Well, let's get back into it, because I know you're on borrowed time at this point. So I want to cover some things about San Diego that we didn't quite get to, especially from the St. Louis side. I think we're pretty clear on that. So let's jump right back into it. And if you didn't catch it, we're trying out new names for the second half of Flyover on Thursdays. Used to be the Wind Down, WIND. Then it became the Wind Down when we had Noble Ice on board. I'm tossing around names, and Santi liked one of them. I didn't get a lot of feedback from you, Stu. The Final Flight was one. Final Tap, something beer related, or beer flight. But I think what we're going to go with right now is this one. Welcome back to Flyover After Dark. our first post KTRS show section of the show of the season. Last week was just an absolute bedlam with our live show. So if you listen to this on KTRS last week, if you're listening to us right now, you're listening to us on the pod. But if you listened to Flyover on KTRS last week, I barely even, it was a fever dream of what you might have heard because of the editing that I had to do to make that work. We're back to normal, and I am enjoying a Blue Jay High Five German style pills. Blue Jay Brewing, not just our partner for live events this season, but our official brewery of Flyover Footy, and I don't know, presenting partner of Flyover After Dark. If you're a Major League Soccer fan, you probably know MLS After Dark gets kind of crazy. There's weird things that happen. It defies the laws of gravity at times. Not to say we're going to go that extent for our Flyover After Dark, but it's kind of the vibe that we're going on. What we missed out on the first half of this show is a handful of things related to St. Louis and San Diego. I do think we went pretty long on the Sergio Cordova, which I also have more to talk about Sergio Cordova here in just a minute once Stu departs. But Stu, I got questions for us that we need to dive into about San Diego to really look at well-rounded look at this matchup because San Diego, if you look at the stats in the first half, and actually, since we're on Flyover After Dark, I've got some crazy graphics to show that I don't even know if these are going to make sense, but maybe they can drive the conversation. In the first match week, St. Louis and San Diego actually had almost pinpoint similar XG. 1 point by ASA's count, 1.59 to 1.61, St. Louis to San Diego. The obvious difference is that St. Louis had 1 goal and San Diego had 5. An absurd overproduction to their XG. Just 0.02 XG difference between the two sides. Average possession between the two in match week 1 is 52% for St. Louis, 69% for San Diego. So, you know, St. Louis had about 69% in the first half, and then Charlotte came and St. Louis adjusted. That's going to be something to watch out for, is who can dictate. But field tilt wise, San Diego had 73% of the field tilt, meaning they did more of their work in the final third. St. Louis had 53% against Charlotte. The average height of defensive actions, PPDA numbers, both teams are pretty similar there, close to midfield, around 44, 45 meters from their own goal at their average height of defensive actions. So, Stu, with these numbers, my first question, flat out for St. Louis, is how successful can St. Louis be in dictating the pace and controlling the possession in DeMay's first away game and against this San Diego team that is obviously so skilled at controlling the ball and basically owning possession and field tilt against whoever they want?
Well, I think last week, we got more possession last week than expected. It'll be interesting to see how we do possess and cycle the ball. Do you have the passing map? I know this is throwing it out there.
I do here. Yeah, this is okay. The absolute madness that I was talking about. If you're watching us on YouTube, try to make sense of what I'm showing. If you're not watching us, good luck to us on describing this for you. Because what I've done is I've taken the ASA average passing map and I've overlaid it for St. Louis and San Diego in week 1, where you can obviously see the line differentials of the different teams. What it looks like, San Diego runs a 4-2-3-1. St. Louis runs a 3-4-2-1. And so St. Louis's was more balanced. It was more, there was a front 5, basically left wing back, attacking mid, center forward, right attacking mid, and right wing back. And then on the back line, it connected with a left center back, central center back, and a right center back with a couple center mids in between. San Diego's, you can see that you've got for their average positioning, their left back, their right back, they're wider, or they're wide, but they're a little further back and they're condensed. So San Diego compared to St. Louis was actually much more condensed in their average positioning into the middle third of the field. This, I think, plays into the short passing factor that San Diego had that St. Louis didn't really do a whole lot. What do you make of this chaos and how you can differentiate what St. Louis was doing versus San Diego?
Well, I definitely, first of all, like the fact we're more balanced than some of the passing maps we saw last year. It's actually, I haven't really dove into this. I saw this going around a little bit, not this whole chaos of the overlay, but No, it's interesting just seeing how far advanced our right wing backs were over, Sang Yong, um, which will be interesting to see. Typically, oh man, I'd like to say that we have confidence in the possession and having the ball, though that field tilt, man, if they have a 73% field tilt against us, I am not feeling good about that at all going into this game.
Well, one of the things that I'm looking forward to in this game is seeing how much St. Louis's shape changes against this kind of San Diego team. So knowing that in the first half, we did a lot of this work, and DeMay was very open to me this week about what he was doing with the wingbacks, sending out both wingbacks high, getting them into the final third, leveraging Rafael Santos to send in crosses out wide. Conrad Wallem at times was inverting a little more into the channel, but both of them being incredibly involved into the attack, into the final third, not in a build-up in a traditional sense like San Diego does, because when you look at San Diego's, you see their build-up going with their central midfielders that are more in line with their fullbacks, a little further back on the field, especially their left back. Their right back, I think that was Sargent, was a little more pressed high near Anders Dreyer into the attack. So they had that old Bradley Carnell kind of inversion shape where they moved their right back higher than their left back. I see the condensedness of San Diego leading to quicker passes as their attempt to beat the press. That's one of the things that I've read into San Diego, and what they've been so successful with is they are able to draw teams into pressing them. And they did with Montreal, watching the highlights. They invite the press and then they beat the press. They play right through you. So this is a true test to me of St. Louis's ability to leverage their press to really create those high field turnovers, to not allow their lines to be broken. And that's why I was mentioning my keyest battle of this entire thing, if that's a phrase, is Dante Polvera against Anders Dreyer. Because if we're unable to turn the ball over, if they beat our press, then it could come back to a sprinting match. It could come back to covering in transition. And how much will Yoann Damet have that happen before he actually has them fall back a little bit more? That's kind of my thing about who's going to win the field tilt battle, who's going to win the dictating of their preferred style, and who can put the other team on the back foot. Ultimately, who can be more clinical in their approach. Because if St. Louis is effective in their press, it throws San Diego into complete chaos. That's my second point, is how effective would City's press be against this team, so adept at possession, so adept at breaking the press. That may be, stylistically speaking, I think that may be the key, is how effective can St. Louis's press be when San Diego tries to build out of the back. Whether it is a St. Louis turnover in our attacking third, or a goal kick that ends up playing it to their center backs and they play it out of the back. Regardless of which of those two happen, how effective can St. Louis's press be? Will it be as effective as it was against Charlotte? That could be the thing that throws San Diego off their game. Our press last year was not effective in the slightest. We had to drop back deep. We allowed field tilt to just run wild on us for San Diego with Olaf Melberg at the helm. And so how often can St. Louis win that battle to force San Diego to change their style? That could dictate whether and how often we're able to have field tilt advantage.
Yeah, and did you have the field tilt for the first match, their home opener last year? So I remember it changing pretty drastically after Chucky Lozano went out at like the 10th minute or something.
It did.
Like that.
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know it changed, like, I don't know, 20-point swing or something like that.
Yeah, it was pretty drastic. Yeah, I mean, looking at this, I think first thought is, what minute are we going to see a Chris Durkin yellow card with those quick passes in the midfield if he's going in for some dangerous challenges? Because that could also change the match pretty heavily if he gets a yellow early and it has to kind of back off a bit.
Yeah, that's one of those things that it's a sneaky tactical issue. If you've got a courageous central midfielder or a player that likes to go in for tackles, they're on a yellow early, that could change the entire landscape. So that's definitely something to watch out for as well. Stu, I have one more crazy graphic to show on our live stream, and it's what happens when you invert the two passing networks. These are the two teams playing against each other based on match week 1. And you can see this kind of battle where you have the attackers for San Diego right in between the center backs for St. Louis, whether it's Anders Dreyer or Ingvartson, that I see spacing that they try to get in the channels. And if our center backs, especially our wide center backs, are playing so wide, what we might look like and how we're going to close those gaps. Daniel Edelman could end up being one of the most important players in how he helps our center backs cover a player like Anders Dreyer or Anibal Godoy as they're trying to progress the ball up. And then ultimately, I just wonder how high our wingers, our wing backs are going to be able to be here, because San Diego clearly had no intention against Montreal of playing the kind of spaces, especially on our right side, their left. They had no intention of playing those kinds of spaces with where Thomas Totland or Conrad Vollum could be.
Yeah, just also interesting. San Diego left center back. Is Manu Dua their starting left center back going off of?
He is, yep.
Okay, yeah. Manu Dua is their primary, center back progressing the ball. Also matches with, Tim Ream playing on the left center back position last week as their primary ball progressor. Oh man, no, this all that progression through the midfield does not make me warm and fuzzy, Matt. Stop it.
Okay. We'll take that one away. But I think the idea being we have stark philosophies that one will give, and I think it will change one team's style compared to match week 1. So we only have a small sample size to draw from. Individually, though, what I'm looking for from St. Louis is to get more out of Songbin Zhang or the player in that role, whether it's Songbin or Toyshirt. I think we're going to need more than 24 touches out of that attacking position in order to have a more balanced approach and be successful in engaging San Diego into various aspects of their final third. It's ultimately going to be the first huge test for Demay. Different style, successful team. Charlotte is a playoff team. Don't get me wrong, like a 3-8, but San Diego's that next echelon. This is the next step up in tests for Demay and for the club. Do you think, random question, Stu, do you think Mbake plays in this game?
No, and I hope he doesn't. I think it'll be good that he travels. He can bond with the team, but he hasn't played in a match since January 11th, so I don't want someone who's not match fit being thrown into a match and potentially having some sort of soft tissue injury or something like that. Stick with what we have, and off the bench, if we need him, we always have Kyle Hebert. Well, no, I mean that seriously, not in a sarcastic way or.
I didn't mean to laugh. Kyle Hebert's stout defensively.
Yeah, or rotate in, always rotate back Durkin and have Tomas Totland. I don't know. You could tweak some pieces with some of the flexibility out there, but it's not a situation I would risk Mbake.
Well, Lucas McNaughton too.
Oh yeah, that's ahead of Hebert. I always forget he exists. I don't know why.
Sneaky. He's as long as he's healthy, he's going to be an absolute asset on that back line.
So absolutely no reason to toss him into this one.
That's fair. Last couple stats I have on San Diego, we know they keep a high line, a horizontal wide shape that I showed, but they're even in how they enter. So it's not a team that we're going to have to say, all right, it's just Pulver, or it's just Orozco, or our wing backs, one or the other, are going to have to help out. In entering the opposition penalty area, they had 5, 6, and 7 entrances into the opposition penalty area last week on the left, the central, and the right side. 5, 6, and 7. I mean, they're a balanced attack. Anders Dreyer, yes, but I mentioned earlier how willing he is to drop in centrally, to move across the field, take positions in the final third that aren't necessarily like a right winger type position. And they had 14, 12, and 24 entrances into the final third in general. So yes, they do skew more into their right back in progressing higher up on the field and their right wing side with Dreyer and Anibal Godoy. But at the same time, they're very willing to spread it around. And I think that compared to the balance that we saw from St. Louis, I mean, I'm not just being a homer when I say this, but this could be one of the most interesting tactical battles of the entire week. And I feel it's not going to get the press or the focus that it could deserve, not just because St. Louis hasn't been a flashy team to cover, but the last match after Sunday Night Soccer, Sunday night MLS After Dark, it's just going to be for the sickos that want to stay up late on a Sunday night. But I do think this could be one of the most replayed games because of how interesting the battles could be if it's a high-scoring game. Now, I think it's going to be a lower-scoring game, but we're going to see. So, Stu, any final thoughts before you head out on San Diego, St. Louis?
It's definitely going to be worth staying up for this one. So yeah, get somewhere where there's a watch party, or turn on your TV, get cozy, and dig in.
All right, man. Appreciate your time. Good talking with you, Stu. Enjoy the weekend and enjoy the game on Sunday.
Yep. Go City.
That's Stuart Holgren, folks. My name is Matt Baker, and I'm sticking around for a little bit because we're Flyover After Dark right now, and we have more topics. And on the live stream, I got to get myself off this full screen. We have more topics to discuss. First and foremost, let's look at City 2. City 2 opens their season this Saturday at home against SKC 2, and they have a lot of roster announcements that they made this week because basically they didn't have a roster going into this week. They had a few players, but they now have a full roster. First announcements that came for City 2's roster were Palmer Alt, Jamon Barkley, and Nate Martinez. Palmer Alt, we're familiar with his name. Forward, was on trial with City this preseason out of Indiana University, former second-round super draft pick by the Colorado Rapids. He was signed through December 26th with club options through June 2028. Now, this is going to be a pervasive thought here of short-term contracts with a couple options. Palmer Alt, 21 years old. Jamon Barkley, a defender from UNC Charlotte, U20 experience on Jamaica's national team, signed through June 2027 with a club option through June 2028. Nate Martinez is a 21-year-old goalkeeper out of Georgia Southern, signed through December 2026 with club options through June 2027. Cooper Forcellini begins the next slew of announcements. The super draft pick, second round 2026 super draft pick, is a 22-year-old midfielder signed through December 2026 with club options through June 2028. Zach Lillington also receives a City 2 contract, 21-year-old defender, primarily a right center back from what we've seen and what we will continue to see. First round super draft pick in 2026, signed through December 2026 with club options through June 2028. Sidney Paris, a 23-year-old defender from Wake Forest, was another trialist added late to St. Louis City this preseason, joins the club from Seguero FC, who has also 15 caps for the Puerto Rican national team. Sidney Paris signed through December 2026 with the club option through June 2027. And then latest, the just breaking on Thursday, Jack Wagner. If there are long-term City fans, City 2 fans, City Academy fans, Jack Wagner, 21-year-old midfielder, returns home to St. Louis. A midfielder who hails from Chesterfield, Missouri, graduated from Marquette High School. Shout out to the Rockwood School District, a rival high school of my wife. Played for St. Louis Scott Gallagher, that Jack Wagner did, City Academy, and 4 years at Indiana University before now returning home to City 2. Exciting to add to this roster. All of these players join Colin Welsh, who's a goalkeeper on City 2, Emilio Chavez, who has grown through the academy ranks, and this is by the City app. So I don't recall these not being announced, but they have Patrick McDonald and Chris Pearson as midfielders. We heard those. Lorenzo Cornelius and Riley Lynch are the other players on City 2's roster. Now, the first game is Saturday. City 2 also, or MLS Next Pro rather, has inked a deal with, I believe, One Football. I don't have this in front of me, but I believe all their matches will be streamed on YouTube as opposed to Apple TV, which, yes, it's a different medium, but all their matches should also be replayable, which they weren't last year. And for somebody who likes to analyze City 2 just as much as City to see some of these exciting young players, I love that. Takeaway for this roster, look at these ages. 21, 22, 21, 22, 21, 23, 21, and a couple academy players amongst other things. Former academy, Emilio Chavez and Lorenzo Cornelius. Youth national team prospects in their own right, teenagers. This is a reloaded City 2. This will be a different City 2 than we've had the past couple of years. We're not loading up on mid-20s talent that max out their capabilities at the Next Pro /USL level. There's a lot of potential on this City 2 team. This is going to be a really interesting matchup to watch at Energizer on Saturday to see what we actually have from this club and who receives time from City down with City 2 as well. Because while these are players signed to contracts with City 2, don't forget that St. Louis City players can also play down. So if you look at our preview on our club roster profile here, you have some players like Miguel Perez, Makai Joyner, Caden Glover, if he's healthy, maybe even other players like Lucas McNaughton, if he doesn't see time, Kyle Hebert, some of these players that don't receive time, even Celio Pompeu, they're not receiving time with City. They are candidates to play for City 2. Question this weekend will be who stays behind, if anybody, from City to play for City 2. That's the biggest thing. Usually the matches are MLS on Saturday, MLS Next Pro on Sunday. And so it's easier as a club to manage. If a player doesn't play on Saturday for City, then they might play on Sunday for City 2. This weekend is going to be interesting to see who travels and who doesn't. Who we see play on Saturday will be a pretty good indication of who on the City roster is not going to be available for City 2, for City on Sunday, rather. The schedule currently shows 7 p.m. kickoff on Saturday. That's on the app, and please look for emails if you have tickets. Watch the socials just to make sure it's not changed to an afternoon game. Jerry Hayes notes that 2 times were posted, 4 and 7. So I don't have the final confirmation. I just have what's available to me on the app. Let's move on to, I don't know, the first segment I think I called, in my notes I called first drink. Second drink, let's look at MLS. There are a couple big news that MLS released later in this week on Thursday. The first one's a positive. The first one for MLS, they've released they put out a press release saying that this was the highest opening weekend attendance in league history, and viewership had massive growth from last season. So in attendance, opening weekend attendance reached 387,271 fans, making it the highest MLS opening weekend attendance in league history, the highest single match weekend total ever, and a milestone highlighted by the 75,673 at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum for Miami and LAFC, the second largest standalone crowd in Major League Soccer history. And the bigger number are the folks that tuned in to watch live matches. MLS says that there were 9.7 million live match viewers across linear and streaming platforms, which is a 59% year-over-year increase to open this campaign in 2026. Now, if you're paying attention to Major League Soccer, or you're a subscriber and you're able to watch matches, you kind of understand why this is the case. You take away a paywall that is specifically for the league, and you're probably going to increase your viewership. Now, you take away a paywall and you incorporate this into your already existing streaming platform that has, I haven't seen the latest Apple TV numbers, at minimum tens of millions, but more like probably tens of millions, then you're going to have more eyes on the sport. I think they could do a better job of marketing it on the tiles in the app, but it is what it is. They have a special section. I think the synergy between MLS and Formula One that's going to be a huge benefit for Major League Soccer, for viewership overall in MLS, City, other teams. I think that's going to be a big benefit. 9.7 million to start the season on the weekend. Huge number. Magnify that over the 15 games. That's pretty good. I don't know if these are folks who just tuned in for a second, tuned in for a minute, tuned in for a match, half a match. I don't know what the metrics are in how long you had to view it, but that's exposure. And that's a much positive number, much more positive than last season. No matter how you try to spin it, if you're an MLS hater, no matter how you try to spin it, that's better than last year. And being on Apple TV, not MLS Season Pass, is a massive benefit. The misstep by MLS, in my opinion, borderline misstep, is the third drink of Flyover After Dark. And it's the fact that MLS is now allowing teams to sell ads on the lower back of their jersey. It was announced by Sportico earlier on Thursday that Major League Soccer will now allow clubs to start selling advertising space on the lower portion of the back of their jersey. There's some really fascinating quotes in the Sportico article, including from MLS Chief Revenue Officer Carter Ladd, saying, "We feel like this is the right moment in time to unlock a new asset for our clubs to capture the attention coming out of the World Cup. The next era for our league is on the horizon. And forgive me if I scoff and roll my eyes, but oh my goodness, is the next era for our league is on the horizon being tied to we can sell ad space on the bottom of our jersey. Give me a break. I mean, if that heralds the next era for our league, then it's going to be a long, bumpy journey if that's what you're talking about. Now, I obviously imagine that they're talking about like opening up possibilities in a lot of different ways, unlocking sponsorships, partnerships. What this means, it means additional revenue for teams. Bottom line, it's not what they call in Sportico. It's not game-changing revenue, but it will be a welcome addition. The financial opportunity varies widely, but the quote in the article is that the new space could command more than $1 million annually for some clubs. Obviously, your LAFCs, your Galaxies, your Miamis, they're going to have that. They're going to be at the top of that list, the ones that are the most valuable franchises, which the top 10 most valuable MLS franchises are Miami, LAFC, LA Galaxy, Atlanta United, New York City FC, Seattle Sounders, Austin FC, Columbus Crew, FC Cincinnati, and San Diego. Amenities, facilities, sales, players, locales, all of that plays into it. So expect this at some point. We're going to probably see it grow on a team-by-team basis. It says MLS is allowing their teams to do it. So now the sponsorship, the corporate side of each team will begin their negotiations, their recruitment for sponsors. All I can hope for isn't that St. Louis won't do this. It's that whatever they do, whoever they recruit and have as a bottom jersey partner isn't going to completely diminish the brand. I trust that they won't do that. I think, with Purina as that, with BJC, we've got local ties. I assume and I expect them to have a local partner with this as well. We'll see. We'll see how long it takes. It's not going to be this season, but it could be the back half. Who knows? But I would expect it to start next season at the earliest. Okay, now, if you want to talk more Sergio Cordova as a designated player, let's strap in because I think we did a good amount to start the episode, and I would love if you're joining us on our live chat, if you have a Sergio Cordova take, then drop it in because there's a lot to dive into, roster rule related, player quality related. There's a lot. So let's do it. To start, Sergio Cordova is making our team jump into the 3DP 3U22 roster mechanism build. The other aspect of this would be 2 DPs, 4 U22s, and $2 million GAM for the season. You get that $2 million GAM conditionally to be spent before the roster lock date in October of that year. That's important because Wray is looking at that as an opportunity cost, like I mentioned earlier in the show, of what he's looking to do for Cordova. I'm going to put statistics aside for a second. What I want to do right now is look at what Corey Wray actually said in his press conference. And I tweeted this out earlier this week. So I want to kind of like expand upon that just a little bit because this is a lot of the crux of the conversation. It's not necessarily his ability, his stats. That's being thrown around here and there. But this is the first time St. Louis has really dove into this type of roster maneuvering. So first and foremost, Corey Wray in his quote said, or the quote in the article said that he is classified as a designated player for the loan period. So this means two things by itself. Obviously, the loan expires in June and the DP slot is freed if he doesn't sign. But the other thing it means is that if we pick up his option, he is no longer occupying a DP slot. So first and foremost, that has to be known and understood, is that we have a third designated player for the first half of this year only. We have a free DP slot upcoming this summer. We have signed a replacement for Klaus for the moment. Whether it will be a successful replacement or whether it falls into the Jean De Silva category of bringing in a player and hoping that they show more promise than they were able to fulfill in previous teams, that has yet to be proven. And that will be what this move is judged upon. This summer, when we're in a World Cup break, we'll evaluate it. And if it is an unsuccessful, just frustrating tenure by Sergio Cordova, then we'll call a spade, and we'll be able to analyze that and say this was a huge miss. And you brought somebody on, you could have had the $1 million in GAM and you could have made better use for it. At that point, if that happens, the ask is that Corey Wray learns from what he did, and you don't just add a player because you feel like you're backed yourself into a corner by selling your leading goal scorer. You have to think about it differently, bigger picture, understand what your first move means for your second. And if you're not able to make that second as you want to, maybe don't fall into your 2B, 2C type options. The other factor is the roster maneuvering for this means that obviously the loan is front loaded. There are transfer market value puts him at about $1.5 million. Previous, there are reports that the purchase option is over $2 million. And so if we were to execute any of that and we make the transfer fee amortized for the life of the contract, like Klaus's was, then he would be a DP for the life of the contract. But front loading it in whatever way they negotiated clearly means he won't be a DP afterwards. And that's part of this entire loan agreement. And that's a shrewd move because you still want to allow the flexibility in the summer. And so that leads us to the second quote, which is putting Sergio in the DP slot will benefit us in several ways while also giving us options moving forward. Without more information, this gets a little weird. This is a little difficult to analyze because we don't know the terms of the loan. We don't know Cordova's salary. We don't know how much we're on the hook for as far as his current salary with his loan. We don't know if there was an extra loan fee in addition to the purchase price. All of that's unknown. And so it makes it difficult to fully judge. But the options moving forward are fairly straightforward related to that number one. Looking at this as benefiting us in several ways is kind of an issue with the amount of information we have. If we pick up his option, I think it makes sense, and that this would have been a shrewd move. If we don't, yes, the DP slot opens up, and that's great, and we still have that flexibility. But we're also out that $1 million GAM and the opportunity cost. It's not lost GAM. It's not GAM that we're having taken away. It's just we could have taken it. We could have used it. We could have bought it, but we didn't. We chose not to because we're following this Cordova DP, not DP in the summer kind of operation. There are some hypotheticals. There are some what ifs. There are some assumptions being made, but ultimately this comes down to what his production will be over this next 11 to 12 games. He provides DP value. If he does enough goal contributing to make Corey Wray think he's worth signing and adding to our depth at striker, while we still then will have an opportunity to fill another DP slot, that's a win. And you could call it lucky, you could call it whatever you want, but if that ends up working out, then Corey Wray is going to look a lot better than even what his harshest critics give him credit for. So bottom line with this, we're sitting here on February 26th. You might be listening to it on the 27th, 28th, March 1st. Important to note that Corey Wray had to lock St. Louis into a roster construction model last Friday. The Friday before Matchday 1, 7 p.m. was the roster lock date. Wray had to declare, we are going the 3DP model. We are going the U22 model. At that point, we had heard there were negotiations and finalizations of the Cordova agreement. So it makes sense that you were committing yourself to that, knowing that you were about to get over the line with Cordova. But also, it wouldn't surprise me if Wray was in the process throughout of going for a DP level player, whether it's a long-term or a short-term loan like this. And he was already committed to foregoing the $1 million in GAM. He wanted to build our roster this way. That to me is part of the story that is an assumption, but I think based on everything we know and we don't know, that's a fair assumption to make. And yes, there are. I do think that if Sergio Cordova is, I wouldn't say awful, but I would say if he doesn't perform well, it falls back on Wray in the sense that it was a swing and a miss. I don't view this as, okay, massive failure, we're screwed going forward. I view this as if it doesn't work out, it's clear to me what he attempted. It's clear to me what he wanted to do with all of this. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Not everybody hits, but this is a unique, innovative way compared to all of our roster build before that we've brought in a player utilizing a DP slot while also still planning for an immediate DP future. And I will at least give credit to Corey Wray for that. The analysis of whether this was successful or was not successful will have to wait until the summer. And trust me, we will have that. Last thing that I want to look at is a rundown of our overall roster. I want to look at our depth chart. I want to look at our transfer tracker, and I want to look at our overall roster. So let's dive into that. Transfer tracker so far. This is where we sit with a month left in the transfer window. This is all the work that we've done so far. This is everything from the players that we declined options for that we sent from last season up until right now. We have, as we sit here on February 26th, Rasmus Alm, Alfredo Morales, Akil Watts, Michael Wenzel, Selmer Pedro, Seth Antwi, Jay Reed, Joey Zielinski, Henry Kessler, Devin Padelford, Christian Oliveris, and Joao Klaus were on our team last year, no longer on our team for 2026. Christian Oliveris is on loan. He is the only player of the bunch still with the city organization, but on loan to SC Jacksonville for the 2026 season. Incomings now look a lot better. We've been tracking this for a couple of months now, and we now know that we have a pretty significant spine of players. We have a pretty clear understanding of what Corey Ray's been building towards this, and we are looking at, as far as the incomings, Daniel Edelman, central defensive midfielder, Conrad Wallem, midfielder winger, currently right wing back for St. Louis, Rafael Santos, left wing back, Mbake Fall, center back, Dante Polvera, center back, Lucas McNaughton, center back, and Sergio Cordova, forward. Yes, the graphic is a little outdated based on what preseason expectations we had, but you can see multiple center backs brought in. You can see multiple wingers brought in. You can see a forward and a central midfield. That's a pretty good supplement to some of the guys that Corey Ray has extended, like Betcher and Durkin. So you can see the long-term plan as it breaks down. So we can look at our projected depth chart as it sits right now, with St. Louis having 28 players out of 30 currently under contract and with the team not on loan. We have not announced that we've used slot 31. We have not announced an off-roster homegrown slot. Both of those slots we've talked about before. They're basically long-term loans or season-long loans for either homegrown players or minimum salary type players. The thing as far as this overall roster goes is that Corey Ray has built this club having 8 players under contract now through June 2028. 15 players have options that go through June 2028. So when you look at this depth chart, which I'll describe here in a second for our audio listeners, know that the contracts that we have that go through at least June 2028 are Marcel Hartl, Palou Fall, Conrad Wallem, Chris Durkin, Daniel Edelman, Simon Betcher, Makai Joyner, and Dante Polvera. The contract that we have whose options go through at least June 2028 are Marcel Hartl, Roman Berkey, Jake Girdwood Reich, Palou Fall, Conrad Wallem, Chris Durkin, Daniel Edelman, Simon Betcher, Rafael Santos, Mbake Fall, Lucas McNaughton, Makai Joyner, Tyson Pierce, Haziel Orozco, and Dante Polvera. 15 players that we are capable of playing for St. Louis through June 2028, the first full season in the calendar shift, based on whose options we have available to us now. And for sure, 8 of our players right now, talking about attacking midfield Hartl, starting center back Palou Fall, starting right wing back Conrad Wallem, starting central midfielders Durkin and Edelman, starting striker Simon Betcher, Makai Joyner, who's playing the 10, and Dante Polvera, who I envision to be a rotational center back player. That's a pretty good core to have as you go into a season, especially as Corey Ray's taking over for his first window. There are a lot of discussions about, do we have too many players under contract going into after the window that Corey Ray starts with? This is clearly not a rebuild. If you're bringing back this many players, if you're extending a handful of players and you have this many, SKC is doing a rebuild. We are not doing a rebuild based on everything that we're seeing here. Now, looking at this depth chart, let's go through center back. So we're looking at a 3-4-2-1 formation right now. Center backs, our depth chart at the top, Baloo Fall, Timo Baumgartel, and Ibaka Fall, left to right. That's how I view it. We've got the 2 Falls and we've got Timo. Behind them, we've got Dante Polvera on the left, Lucas McNaughton central, and Haziel Orozco on the right, and then Yarrow and Hebert behind them. That's a market improvement from where we were sitting a year ago at this time. Goalkeepers, Berkey and Lunt, obviously. Left wing back, our depth chart sits with Rafael Santos and Celio Pompeu. Our right wing back depth chart sits with Conrad Vollum, Thomas Totland, and Tyson Pierce, with the big caveat there that obviously Thomas Totland is trusted left and right. And I would argue that Conrad Vollum can be trusted left and right too, depending on what happens, because Yoann Demey acknowledged Vollum played a lot on the left last year. So when we think about depth, when you see depth charts listed like I have on our live stream and on our YouTube, it's more nuanced than that, because if Rafael Santos goes down with an injury, we are just as likely to see Conrad Vollum on the left or Thomas Totland on the left and the other on the right as we are Celio Pompeu just stepping up in that role because he's listed second on the depth chart. Vollum and Totland's versatility plays a huge factor. So we could be looking at either way on that. A lot of options if one of those 3 players go down. In the central midfield, I've got it Leuven and Edelman, but honestly, at this point, you might as well put Durkin and Edelman for everything that we know and we've seen. Ostrok's hurt, JGR is on loan, and Miguel Perez is the primary backup in that role with Edu Leuven absent right now. In the attacking midfield, this is where it gets a little interesting depending on how you view the formation. I'm viewing it right now as 2 attacking midfielders and a striker. So you have Marcel Hartl and Songbin Jeong presumably as the top 2 options right now. Cedric Toyshirt is knocking at that door. Cedric Toyshirt getting healthier, scoring goals in the preseason, having a lot of goal scoring opportunities in the second half against Charlotte. I think he's pushing for that starting role right alongside Marcel Hartl. So when I talked earlier, can we get more from Songbin Jeong in this game? If Songbin starts this game and has a performance like he did against Charlotte, and then Toyshirt comes in 60 minutes or so, and he has 2, 3, 4 shots on goal, maybe even scores a goal, Toyshirt's pushing for that spot. And so that's an area to watch for. Hartl is locked and loaded as a DP international player right there as an attacking mid, no doubt. Simon Betcher is locked and loaded right now as a striker, but Sergio Cordova is right there next to him. So he enters the equation as either a replacement for Simon Betcher or in that other role where Songbin Jeong currently has. And I just talked about Cedric Toyshirt being an option. You could run it with 1 attacking midfielder and 2 strikers, or more of 1 attacking midfielder and a 9.5 kind of a player. Really depends on how Demey wants to do that. I'm pigeonholing this into labeling formations, but we know from what Demey has told us and from the first game that formations are more, positional based. You're not always going to drop into this formation. You're not going to drop into a 3-4-1-2. You're not going to drop into a 4-4-2 all the time. On rest defense, on the press off the ball, it will look different than when we have the ball in possession playing out of the back. There's a lot of different things that we will see, but these next couple of games, as far as this depth chart goes, will help to shake things out. We've got a lot of answers. We have 2 injured center backs right now that I think will step into starting roles when they're healthy. And we have 1 very suspect attacking midfield / forward spot after week 1 in Songbin Jeong's role. So he's the player to watch out for on will he retain his role week over week going into performances. And you could also have some of these other players dip. Betcher had a pretty good game in week 1, but will he dip? What about Vollum? Will he dip? Will Totland get an opportunity? There's some questions left to be answered, but I think we've got a pretty good idea of where we're going with this. Looking at, Sergio Cordova, question in the chat. I don't think he'll play the 10 at all. If he is in the game, I think we're looking more at a 3-4-1-2, unless he takes Betcher's role. I think he's that target 9. He's the hold up striker. He's playing in the box. He's not linking up play from deeper positions. So I would look for Cordova to be higher up, either alongside Betcher or in place of Betcher when he finally steps in. Summer targets, what's your prediction? What positions, assuming they sign a DP, where would they step in? Abo, I have been consistent in one thing, and that I am not going to spend a ton of time on projecting individual players. There's too many players in the world. There's too many players that I don't know of. Sergio Cordova was a player I didn't know of. And I think I'm comfortable saying that and being honest with it. I have done a ton of research into him since I became aware of him, but he wasn't on my target list. I will say some of the other players that I know City has been interested in, I am very aware of and are very intriguing in the quality and profile, and I would say how they would help us in the number 9 position. But Cordova, I didn't know, so I don't like to speculate on a ton of individual players. Now, some of your questions on what positions, assuming they sign a DP, where would they step in? The scenario of Cordova remaining on the team opens up the option for me to have a DP attacking midfielder. You could have this kind of formation, a 3-4-2-1, and you sign a second DP attacking midfielder alongside Marcel Hartl. So you have 2 playmaking, goal-scoring threat DP midfielders in the attack. That's valuable, especially if you have a proven Cordova with a Betcher who hopefully is in form. But if Cordova doesn't perform and we don't pick up his option, I think we got to go DP9. I just think that there's too much unknown. There's too much potential that this team has that will be squandered if we don't have a better proven goal scoring number 9. And I don't think Betcher is that guy at this point. He can prove himself to me, and I want him to prove it to me and to all the fans that he could be a double-digit goal scorer throughout the season, and that he does more of what he did in the link-up play and in the creating this past week. His average positioning was lower than our wingbacks and our other 2 attackers. So seeing how he gets involved and his finishing capability will give me a lot of reassurance going in. But as of right now, if Cordova doesn't perform and we don't bring him back, we need a DP9. If Cordova does perform and he gets signed and he scores a handful of goals over 11 or 12 games, maybe I'm comfortable with a Cordova Betcher type forward spot. Cordova won't be a DP, and we sign a DP10 to go alongside Marcel Hartl. That's a fairly that's a fun option that I think we can do. I think that's it for us on Flyover Footy. We have exhausted a lot of the conversation that I want to. I think we're going to call it. So I appreciate you sticking with us for the entirety of this episode. Thank you to Blue Jay Brewery for yet again sponsoring our Flyover After Dark. Thank you to everybody for tuning in on audio, on video, joining us late, and stay excited about St. Louis. It was a fun match week 1. It's going to be a late match week 2. Go to the watch parties if you can. Jump on social media and chat around with us while if you aren't, or even if you are. It's always a fun time to watch and talk City. I appreciate all of you being with us. For Stuart Holgren, who had to pop out earlier, my name is Matt Baker. Thanks again for joining us on Flyover Footy. Go City, and we'll talk to you later. And I have no idea how I managed to make that an hour and 42 minutes, y'all. But I appreciate you sticking around on the live stream, especially. You guys are the true champs. And for the chat, I've tried to keep as many of these questions as I can. I'm going to scroll through real quick to see if I missed any. I think... Ooh, I saw Betcher gets injured. I don't want to see what that was related to. Sponsorships. Yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe we'll talk about that in a Fallout. Toss out what kind of sponsorships you want to see St. Louis take advantage of on the bottom of their kits. It's probably going to be one of those big corporations, or even like the industry that you want to see. That'd be an interesting conversation. What industry do you want to see on the back of our kit? I don't know if MLS is going to allow alcohol or gambling or anything like that, but it's entering the conversation. I haven't seen a lot of questions on our starting 11. That one's interesting. There seems to be some pretty universal agreement at the moment. Celio Pompeu is a player that a lot of people were asking about this week, and I don't know what to make of Celio other than what Yohan DeMay had said to me midweek when I asked him about Thomas Totland, and it was talking about Totland's defensive prowess in the moment. So knowing that we were drawn in stoppage time, he trusted Totland to get up. He trusted Totland to defend. Didn't seem like he had the same value of trust in Celio's defensive work, which isn't a surprise. That's been the criticism, is that if he's playing a wing back, he's a little suspect on the defense. And that could be what loses him playing time. In this system that I'm still showing the depth chart on, in this system, Celio's not going to beat out Marcel Hartl. not going to play a striker. I guess he could be in the argument for that other position, but it really doesn't seem like Yohan DeMay is valuing him in that role like he is Mekhi Joyner. Because I didn't even mention Mekhi Joyner, who may play the 10 this week, but Joyner in preseason was in that right attacking mid, and Saleo was definitely not. So you want to see Saleo in the attack, you might not be seeing that with Yohan DeMay. Other than that, I'm excited about this lineup. I think this lineup continues to improve. The players we're going to get from injury and new signings are going to continue improving it. And this is just the first window of Wray. Wray had said 6 to 12 months. Team's going to look different in the summer, but I think this is a team that is built and building to compete. The talent's there. We'll see what DeMay can get from them. And my goodness, is San Diego going to be a tough challenge. So cheers to St. Louis, and go City against San Diego. Enjoy the trip to anybody who's going to be there. Also, you guys are MVPs for traveling. As if there's anybody who travels regularly, God bless you. I travel when I can, and away days are one of my most fun things to go see and do. If you've never been to an away day, you owe it to yourself to try and plan one, because going with City fans in an unfamiliar territory, just hanging out at a bar or a restaurant or a brewery, doing pre-game, post-game activities with friends and supporters, there's really nothing like it. Super fun time. So, all right. Cheers, y'all. Have a good one. I'll talk to you later.